Thank you everyone for taking the time to join this webinar on remote proctoring. We've got three experts from the field here. We've got Scott Crumpler from Proctor360, Don Kastner from Monitor EDU, and Mike Murphy from Proctor3. You can see on the screen, Don and Scott are here. Mike is still joining. I think he's got some hardware issues with his audio or something. But I think we'll get rolling now. It's 10:03, and hopefully Mike can get in. First of all, I'll introduce myself. And so I'm Nathan Thompson. I'm CEO and co-founder of Assessment Systems. And we're one of the leading providers of software for IM banking and test delivery. But we don't do proctoring ourselves. So we work with some of the best organizations in the world that do provide proctoring, which is why I've got three of them on the call here. So hopefully we have a good discussion panel on some of the current issues with remote proctoring, how to help select what's the best approach for your organization, how to maximize success for the candidates by getting them prepared, and keeping things secure while also improving the convenience, because we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to test and show what they know so they can earn whatever credentials or anything else that's coming out of the test. We've got 34 attendees here, which is great, and this will get posted for those of you who aren't here and your colleagues aren't able to make it. We'll record it and get this on our YouTube channel so that people are able to watch. Hey, there's Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
All right, I was just about to pass it to you three to introduce yourselves. So let's go ahead and do that. First, introduce yourself, but then also introduce your company so you can cover what kind of proctoring you offer, where you're based, whatever else you'd like to talk about. So
perfect. I'll kick it off since I've joined first. Don Kastner. Most of you that know me know I've been around in this industry for a long time. Started ProctorU in 2008 out of Birmingham, Alabama. Worked with that company through 2016. Left for a couple of years and then started Monitor EDU in 2018. And I'm still in Birmingham and also in Nashville. I go back and forth. Monitor EDU, we're just really simply focused on live proctoring. What I tell people is, from our perspective, there's a couple things you have to do. You have to be able to see the student or candidate. We do that with a webcam. You got to be able to see what they're doing. We do that through screen share, and we use a second camera, a mobile device. You have to know who they are. We just go with a simple ID check. And then you have to administer the exam according to the rules. And so that's the process that I followed for the last 16, 17 years, and we continue to process it. We're not a technology company per se. We use tried and true technology tools that are easy to integrate. A lot of what we do is using the standard meeting tools that we're all using right now. Because they're solid, they're with big companies. If Google goes down, they're back. That impacts billions of people, so they get that up pretty quickly. We also have our own proprietary technologies that we use, and then we also work with a number of other companies that have their own technologies. And so it's really a good model. Ultimately, think of us as the proctor. And that's what we do, and we use technology to our benefit. So, Scott.
Hi guys, I'm Scott Crumpler. I'm the Global Marketing Director for Proctor360. I'm filling in actually for Kranthi Bathula, our Chief Technology Officer, who was originally scheduled to participate today. He had an urgent issue he had to deal with, so I'm the backup team. Proctor360 is a remote proctoring company that's been around for about 6 years now, and our company offers a complete range of remote proctoring services, from AI all the way up to live remote proctoring, including types of live proctoring that capture more than just the view from the webcam and screen share, including using secondary cameras and even proprietary 360-degree camera technology to really capture the entire testing space for truly high-stakes exams to be able to be proctored remotely with that test center grade security.
Great, thank you. Mike.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Murphy. I'm the founder and CEO of Proctor3. For the past 12 years, we've been assisting organizations by providing identity management and on-demand proctoring services. We built a variety of integrations into learning management systems and test delivery engines. We also have an API available.
organization wants to connect our services by using that, and we can work in an unintegrated or kind of wraparound experience. From the test taker's point of view, it's very similar to working with Zoom, but instead of opening a meeting, we're opening an exam URL and then providing reporting back to our client.
Okay, and Mike, you're still in North Carolina?
I am, sorry. Yes, I'm in Charlotte in my office. Very specifically, if you're familiar with Charlotte, I'm in Cornelius.
Yeah, and Mike and I have known each other almost since the beginning. So
I had no gray hair when I first met him.
yeah, it's great to see the same people in the industries because it's changed out a lot over the years. And it's like I turn around, nope, Mike and I are probably two of the longest in the remote game. So
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you all for the introductions. I think let's kick it off by talking about what remote proctoring is and the different types there are. Scott's covered it a little bit there, saying that there is quite a range. So I'd like to make sure that our attendees understand just what that range is like and what are the different types of remote proctoring.
Scott, you did a great job.
What's that? Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the audio cut out there. Sorry, the audio cut out there for a second. Were you asking me a question?
Yeah, let's start by talking about the different types of remote proctoring. So you can explain what Proctor 360 does in terms of the different levels and what they mean.
Okay, sure, yeah. So Proctor 360 has developed a cloud-based platform that provides for the ability to monitor remote exams from either in automated fashion, so that you can provide remote test delivery with some security in place via AI on demand, scheduled anytime, with AI technology monitoring the test taker and looking for very specific verifiable actions or things that happen on screen that can be verified as potential misconduct during the exam. Looking for the presence of mobile devices, or looking for additional people, additional people in the background or on, in the view of the camera. Verifying whether or not the person who actually checked into the exam is the person who is on camera, and things like that. So the AI monitors the exam throughout. The webcam is recorded, in full video. So is all the screen activity, as well as the audio in the room. Whenever it detects a potential cheating incident, it will grab a screenshot of that incident with a label of what that potential incident is. Our approach to that AI proctoring is that we don't want it to disrupt the testing experience. AI, from our standpoint, is not a replacement for human review, and the test taker is able to continue throughout the test. And our customer organizations, whether it's faculty at a school or certification organizations, then review those AI incidents for any exam session that has them via a web-based dashboard. As I said, AI is, we offer that service because it certainly offers a great deal of convenience, but it isn't for high stakes exams where you need more security than that. As Don mentioned, live proctoring is really, having that a human proctor monitoring the session the entire time, where they can actually intervene, during an exam session if they see some misconduct happening.
Let me jump in there, Scott. So it really to go back to your question, Nate. I mean, fundamentally, there's two types of proctoring in terms of remote, right? There's record review that we used to talk about years ago, in the first versions of Proctor Free were that, right? Where you're just taking a video, you're recording it, and then somebody's reviewing it at high speed to see what the incidents are. And then there's live proctoring, which does that, with a person real time. So there's differences between the two. Technology, automation, AI has come in and helped both of those, right? So it's taken the record and review stuff and taken it to another level so that things can be pre-flagged, so that when the reviewer is going in, they can identify the different areas that they need to look at. Fundamentally, it's still being reviewed and you're getting the results after, but you're directing that person on where they should focus their energy. And on the live side, you can do the same thing. The tools are starting to be used where they can help support the live proctors. The eyeballs still do a really good job of facial detection, but there's other flags that can alert the proctor to what they need to do. So ultimately, it's really fundamentally just the two types, and it's how AI blends in there. So, I mean, Mike, did I do a good job of answering that?
You did a great job, Don. When a prospect reaches out to us, some of the early questions are, have you ever used a proctoring service before? If you haven't, that's a different conversation than if you have. Talk to me about the types of assessments that you're delivering. As Don mentioned, it's either on demand or it's not. It's either live or it's not. There's either a human engaged with the test taker or there's not, and it's fine. There's pros and cons to every method, but I have no problem talking to a prospect and clearly understanding, do you need a live proctor? Because I do not do that. And you might want to go talk to someone like Don at Monitor EDU and just save them some time. But yes, as Don mentioned, every organization, as they grow and volume increases, they're looking for efficiency. So that's one of the benefits of, I don't even like the term AI, of layering different technology as the approach, because even if someone wants live, it doesn't necessarily, there might be efficiencies you can layer into scheduling where, yes, it's not on demand, but it's not a long wait. Or maybe with some providers, there is a clear scheduling process. So, yeah, as far as the types of proctoring, that's one of the first things we ask is, what have you been doing in the past? Talk to me about the assessment. And do you need live? Because I am not that business model or provider.
Okay, thank you. That's a great lead into the next question is, how do you help organizations decide what the right approach is for them? What are some of the questions that you would ask and then guide them towards one or the other and whether to use AI or not?
Yes, so, I would say, are you a first-time user or not? Are you K-12? Are you a college or university? Are you kind of commercial? Well, who's the audience? Are they going to be on, company-issued machines? Are they .gov email addresses? What type of devices are you going to need to support? Is the assessment of multiple choice, true, false, high volume, great for us? Or, are there a bunch of external resources allowed where what's allowed and what isn't is very unique, and the organization also wants live? So you can kind of like go through a matrix. Or are you having maybe a frustrating or bad experience? Or right now there's some market instability where some well-known services and brand names are potentially being sunset, and so you've got concerned consumers now that may not have even had a problem, or maybe they don't care as much about certain things, and it's like they just need what's next, what's in the future, what's my next provider going to be. So that's really an opportunity to be consultative and figure out, are we even a good fit as a partner, or should you be going somewhere else?
Yeah, and I think another big part of that thing too is the level of exam security and all the things that Mike.
Yeah, for sure.
But when you get into, it's a securing the candidate and securing the environment, but it's securing the exam. How critical it is to make sure that content isn't replicated, right, and stolen. And so that's a big piece of it. We need to make sure we've got the tools available, and we need to work with the exam provider like we do with you guys. Make sure we've got that secure browser in place. Make sure that we've got all that monitoring. Make sure we've gone through all of the checks that are necessary to make sure that the opportunity isn't there for them to steal that content. And then having that live person to be able to intervene when something does go awry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say, and you used the exact same word to the, how critical the exam is one part of it, but how critical is immediate intervention? That is a key, a key issue that you've got to consider when you start a remote testing program or online test delivery is, if the concern about exam content theft is critical, then you may need to think about live proctoring, because you need an intervention that can stop that as soon as it's detected, versus with an automated or a record and review system where the intervention's always going to be after the fact. So that's a big one. You've got to consider how critical the test is, but also how critical is an immediate intervention for any potential issue.
Absolutely. So AI has been one of the big buzzwords for the past few years. It's already come up a couple times. Scott, can you talk a little bit about how AI works in remote proctoring and what might be something that you'd recommend for an organization?
Yeah, I think I sort of maybe jumped the gun there a little bit. Originally talking about it. So, the AI technology, virtually with it's every vendor out there, as I'm sure Mike would agree, has a little bit different approach to it. But essentially, the AI is monitoring the video feeds that are coming through the test taker's webcam. Sometimes also certain actions that are happening on the screen activity, the screen share video, and looking to detect certain types of incidents that could indicate some kind of misconduct during the exam. And different vendors have different things they look for. Some vendors also have the ability to monitor the audio in the room, listening for multiple voices. Typically during a proctored exam, there's not supposed to be anybody else present, and if there's some AI systems that will monitor the audio in addition to that video. And so whenever that artificial intelligence, that AI engine detects a potential incident, then it's going to flag it in some way. Some AI models, have an interruptive feature that can actually pause the exam or stop the exam, and some, just create a flag and record the incident, for review by the organization or by the faculty or instructor or whoever it may be late after the fact. And then, good practice there is to let the organization, let the instructor or the staff of that school, whoever's actually delivering the test, make that final determination, after reviewing those incidents. AI, is in terms of, why, what it's most useful for. I think, Don and Mike both made excellent points. I think in most cases where we see customers that that gravitate towards AI, it's generally, they generally tend to start off when we ask them to just tell us about your testing program, tell us about the kind of exams you offer, and what volume and testing cadence you want to be able to deliver online. And one of the things that they will typically say very early on, if they're sort of gravitating towards AI, is it's not a high stakes exam, or they may say that we need on-demand delivery, or it's a very high volume exam, and all those things kind of are well suited usually to an AI proctored test session. With live proctoring, we see a lot of it with more critical exams in higher education, and typically with professional certification and licensure, where there's going to be a direct impact if the exam results don't have integrity. A person's going to be able to be licensed to do a job, or to have or to advance in the profession without the actual demonstrated skills or expertise. So that's kind of where I think in general the values or the benefits of of each type. And I think we have some organizations too, and as I'm sure you guys have all seen, where some exams are fine to be automated, and some they really need live proctoring, and not always one or the other. Sometimes it's a mix.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Don or Mike, how does that then mirror the situation where you would figure out that somebody needs a live proctoring or a human review proctoring, and what sort of recommendations do you have for that when somebody comes in and starts asking you questions?
I mean, there's lots of, some of the things that we do, or I sell live proctoring, so I hear a lot of people talk about price as an issue. I hear a lot of people talk about scheduling as an issue, and those are things that actually aren't presented the right way. From a scheduling standpoint, you don't have to have scheduled live exams. We don't. We can if we need to. We don't. Certainly, scalability is always going to be a question that comes up in terms of high volumes, to whether you can do it. So if you have an exam where you've got 10,000 people that need to take it at the same time, that's going to be a real challenge for a live proctoring company to do. But if you've got 500 that need to take it at the same time, we can manage that. And so those pieces are easy. The cost side, that's always a factor that comes up. And AI, the more AI you put into the product, actually the more expensive it gets. it's surprising to me. It has been surprising to me since this has come along. We've looked at a lot of different tools, and they're actually surprisingly expensive in terms of how you deliver that. And I'll give you an example. I had someone talking to me trying to sell me an ID verification program. And so the cost for us was going to be like $1 a unit to be able to do it. And I said, well, that's great. I can do it for like 2 cents, right? Because I could have someone check an ID. And now you could argue that the automated program is better, but is it 99.7% versus 99.9%? I mean, that fractional difference in effectiveness, is that worth the additional cost? And so cost is always going to be a big part of this, but there's also, you have to really think through the entire process. And again, it gets really expensive the more technology you try to throw at the problem. I don't know, Mike, if you had a similar, I mean, you smiled while I was talking, so I didn't know if you agreed or disagreed with what I said.
I always agree with what you say, Dom. Yeah, look, if someone says this is an open book, open note exam, they probably don't need a live proctor. That might just be a case where you need to, is this a real ID? Is the face on the ID look like the face I'm looking at? You might have someone that it's not open book, open note, and they want a secure browser, and they want someone to be able to interdict. And then just back to AI, we try to be very deliberate as much as a prospect will want to soak it up. We leverage AWS recognition tool. That's like the mystery box, right? And of course, and I'm being, in the interest of time, I'm oversimplifying and being very general, but there's things that you can do and say, is there movement in the frame? Is there not movement in the frame? Does it look like there's one face or two faces? Is one of them the right face? And then based on that, you can program in API calls against these robust tools. It's whatever the company uses, whether you develop it yourself or you leverage, a major provider as kind of a backbone for part of your technology. But I think it's important for providers to explain that to the prospective clients and their clients so they understand what's happening in layman's terms. But our AI is largely in partnership with AWS as recognition tools, and it's a matter of how we develop when an API call is made, and then based on the response, does our program then react?
Okay. Thank you. Quite helpful. So we talked about comparing different types of AI here. Now let's also compare it to the traditional approach of in-person or test center delivery. How does it tackle test security and try to maintain the level of security that you'd get with in-person testing, while also increasing convenience and trying to everybody support the everybody test mission that's part of the one of the pillars of MonitoringDU?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting discussion because the modes are so different in terms of what you're doing in a test center versus what you're doing online. And the very simple thing, you don't control the environment, right? If I have a test center, I control my environment. If somebody's testing from home, I don't. And so ultimately you're trying to achieve the same thing, right? I went through the things that I talked about before in terms of being able to see the student, being able to see the candidate, being able to see what they're doing, know who they are, making sure they're following the rules. That's the same, but how you do that is so different, right? And I honestly, like I said, AI helps us through that because it's an assistive technology. I think 5 years ago, everybody was hoping, or 3 years ago, everybody was hoping that it could actually take over and replace. It can't today. It may be able to in 10 years. But it's an assistive technology. And so we use that assistive technology to help us do our job better remotely, to control all the different variables. And the other piece of it too is technology is moving so quickly. I mean, all of this generative AI and all the tools that have been developed, we've had to stay on and really try to become experts in the things that people are now using out there, that they're using to get around the system, that they're using to look up. I mean, something as simple as Grammarly, right? That many of us have loaded on our computers and are just going to run if you're not locking it down. Is that something that can be allowed in a test? Again, in a test center where you control all of that, there's less to worry about relative to that. And obviously there's lots of disadvantages in terms of convenience and cost and all the other things. That's not the focus of today, but it's really how do we use the technology tools to identify the areas of risk that we've got doing it remotely, trying to stay even with technology. I tell people that, I'd like to be a step ahead. I'm cognizant that as long as I could stay even with the different things, we're doing a pretty good job, but we don't want to get a step behind in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah, Nate, I agree with everything Don just said, but I would add to that too. I mean, because you were kind of asking, how does it differ, in terms of, the, and I guess you didn't ask specifically about the value difference, but in-person test centers, which certainly still have a very critical function, but as more and more of the, of learning goes online and is done remotely, um, you know, the you know the people that are the access to education and to training and learning of all types is becoming more open and more available to more people. But if the only way you're able to then validate that learning is by earning whatever credential that requires an exam, if the only way you're able to actually validate that and earn that credential is that you then have to not be remote and for all the reasons that you might have only been able to access that education because it was available online, you now have to set aside in order to be able to travel to a test center, which may not just be an issue of inconvenience, but also just practical or economical issues as well. So there are just true benefits to having the ability to deliver a test anywhere, and as long as there's a secure form of proctoring in place, you have that testing integrity.
And Nate, just to add, he asked, how does remote proctoring enhance test security and validity? And when I heard that, I just think about, I have a lot of transactions as a consumer where I don't want the receipt. I'm moving on. But this morning was a bit unique. I went to the local UPS store and I mailed 5 separate mailings, 5 separate transactions. I wanted a receipt and a tracking number for every single one.
Yeah, it's a great example from a totally unrelated situation of, in some cases you want a lot more, and in some cases you don't. All right. So what are some of the advantages of remote proctoring, not just over, the traditional test center, but even, event-based testing, let's say, or something else that an organization might use?
I mean, obviously it's the flexibility is there, right? Just the time commitment and as expensive as it's gotten. I think to the extent that you've got a model that allows for flexible scheduling, you're not trying to find a seat available in a test center, so that's obviously there. There's also from a monitoring standpoint, we're monitoring way more than you monitor in a test center, right? In that test center, you're just watching candidates sit at their desk and do all of those things. We've got all this other data that we're taking a look at. We're taking a look at audio and sound and multiple cameras and different devices. We're watching what they're doing on their screen. We're watching how they navigate between things. We're looking for other things, and so there's so much more that you monitor. So you could easily make the case that because you're monitoring everything, that you have the ability to catch everything. Doesn't mean you will, but there's very few holes in that particular process, and if you can identify where they're at, then you can try to plug them. I think someone had a question about other people entering the room. There are things that Scott already talked about in terms of audio controls, and then there's just the multiple cameras and just watching people. So if you identify the holes, you can start to plug them and monitor just a lot more than you do in a test center. So those conveniences are all there, and I think over time it's also proven that it's less costly as well, just because you're not trying to reserve that space. So the direct costs I think are a lot less, and even as I said, the indirect costs, not having to get into a car and schedule your day and block out your hours. You can sit at your desk, get it done, and then move on to your next task.
And be able to have an immutable record of every test candidate session in a way that that will protect the integrity and credibility of the exams you offer as an organization. Because whether one individual does or does not cheat or does commit a specific act of misconduct is one part of it, but for everyone that earns an exam online, the exam itself or the credential that you earn has got to have credibility and value, and by incorporating remote proctoring into your online test delivery, there is going to be an immutable record for every one of those exam sessions. That's going to affect the integrity of the credentials and the exam.
Yep.
And I would
Absolutely.
say just the number one thing that comes to mind is it expands access.
Yeah, and that, like we mentioned before, one of the pillars of minor review is everybody tests, and I totally agree with that. You want to make these assessments accessible to people because you don't want to provide yet another part of a hurdle for them entering a field of work or something else.
Yep. The ability to handle almost any accommodation. Right. So it's in a test center, it becomes very unwieldy to be able to do some of those things. Where online, I mean, they're using their own equipment. We don't have to go out and secure that equipment. They've already got it. We just need to authorize it and make sure that it meets all the security requirements. So thanks. That's accessibility. Yeah, definitely a key factor.
Okay, we got 2 questions so far from the field here. So those of you who are listening in, there is a Q&A portion if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to throw in. One is from John Tisdale asking, what challenges are there considering the use of AI proctoring for high-stakes exams? What measures can be put in place to minimize the potential that test content is not compromised by test candidates? I think
I'll jump in, and I think I could start. Yeah, I would say just addressing a couple real quick. I'll go through. So the first thing is you can do system compatibility checks that are consistent before a candidate starts their assessment. Offer free practice uses of a software and strongly encourage folks to do that. But then, I would say that there's no guarantee for what we do. I never guarantee that I'm going to prevent cheating for a client. I'm largely a deterrence. We run like an assembly line, and we work the same way every time. But if I don't get into the what if and gotcha scenarios when someone's evaluating our tool. And then just as far as John, your question, some companies offer restrictive browsers where it can prevent certain things like print screen, copy paste. There has to be messaging to the candidates ahead of time that you are entering a proctored experience. This is going to be reviewed. You risk complete invalidation of your assessment. And then for, outside of higher ed, when you get into, certification, commercial education and training, your job is on the line in many cases, and you're risking your career if you're blatantly caught cheating on some of these assessments. But I would say there's things you can do and layer in, but we don't guarantee we're going to prevent cheating. We're largely a deterrent, and that's the way that we put our service and product.
Yeah, I think the big thing there is you can throw the technology on top of that. You can do all of those things. It's the horse getting out of the barn, and then closing the door afterwards, right? So it's the real advantage of having a live proctor for high stakes is that ability to immediately identify that there's an issue and to try to stop it. So you significantly reduce the risk of content theft because you have somebody that can act upon that. AI and technology are great assistive tools, but ultimately it's that immediate intervention Scott already mentioned earlier. So when we look at high stakes testing, we look at security and content theft being a big issue. It's how are you going to make sure that you can stop it in its tracks? Because especially in those industries where there is huge dollars involved in test prep, there are people that they're going to send in, and you have to deal with that in the test center as well. It's also important too. It's not a catch-all, right? I mean, the old theory was you just send 20 people in a test center and each has to memorize 5 questions, right? Every time you put a question on screen, you're exposing that content. There's nothing we can do to prevent memorization of that, at least on the proctoring side. But it's about putting deterrents in place. It's about putting challenges in place, and then it's about being able to stop it in its tracks. And I don't think AI is there yet. But it definitely has a lot of promise to get there. But clearly, people can do that both in the test center and remotely.
Yeah, I think you guys both made good points, and one of the things just to the John's question about what measures can you put in place, and this this is something that's sort of been emerging. I think in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion about AI being used not just as an option for remote proctoring, but also for creating variations of items into your item bank. And the more, the larger the item bank is that an exam is drawing those questions from, reduces the amount, the amount of content that's going to be exactly the same between any 2 test takers during their exam sessions. So there's things like that that you can do that are preparatory or, that are really related to exam development. That's probably more Nate's area of expertise. You could probably comment on what he thinks of those types of solutions. But I think Don said it well. The challenges are with AI is being able to actually intervene, especially when if the concern is about the test content. Being able to intervene immediately is something that you need a live proctor there for. A lot of exam delivery platforms have an ability that if the live proctor is there and connected to that exam platform, they can actually end the test session, in addition to actually communicating with the test taker or whatever else they need to do. One thing I'll add to what Mike said, in addition to communicating with your test candidates about the fact, that they're going to be recorded, they're going to be watched, they're going to be monitored. I think it's one of those things too, where it's important for an organization to very clearly communicate to their test candidates that exam content theft is a crime. It is not just, getting caught doesn't just mean that you might not get the certification or that you might lose your job or something. It's a crime. You could end up in court. And it's a lot more. There's a lot more consequences that are possible when you do have some kind of proctored recording of your actions during that exam session.
Thank you. I've got a couple more questions come in here now, probably more than we can reply to all of them, and some actually are worth their own webinar in the future. Like Susan Domneski asked about how you could deliver oral exams with remote proctoring, and you absolutely can. Don put a reply in there. Don has worked with that in the past. I'm not sure if Mike or Scott have as well, but it is something that is done. Maybe we should do a future session on that.
For oral exams, I would tell you to start with live proctoring and then maybe work backwards towards a company like ours. We have a couple clients that do it, but they're able to because there's some functionality available in Google Learning Management System. But yeah, when you're saying oral, out loud, verbal, I'm just thinking live proctoring right away.
Yep, agreed. Jim Link asked about how we're defining live proctor. So yeah, Jim, this is proctors watching people on video, just like you're watching us right now. And just like right now, it's usually one directional so that the candidates don't see the proctor, but the proctor sees the candidates, and they'll see a panel of 4 like you're seeing us right now. Though it's kind of up to the testing organization what kind of limit there is in terms of how many they can handle on time. Or, is it a lower stakes exam and they want to go up to like 10 or 15 per proctor, or do they want to keep it down to 1 to 6? That's kind of the discussion that you typically have, I think, with your provider.
Yeah, and just add to that, because we do a lot of that and discuss this every day, right? The other factor is also the competence of the proctoring staff. Is this the only thing that they're doing? Are they using some call center where they're also, as agents, doing other things in addition to proctoring? Are they just focused on that? One of the things that we try to do with event-based is have the proctors proctor the same exam, so the same sets of rules. If I'm a live proctor and I have 6 people up and they're all on different rule sets, it's a lot more challenging than have 6 people up that are on the same rule sets like you would in a classroom. So there are a lot of factors on that, and it's important to understand it. You have to walk through that whole process and understand all the factors. It's not some number that can just be set arbitrarily. But yeah, it's live proctor means you have a live person that's managing it and can intervene when they need to.
Yeah, real time proctoring might be another way to kind of describe it.
Yeah, and as Don mentioned there, the intervention is a key piece to that, and not just intervening video or chat wise and saying, hey, you left, or I just see you bent down, can you stay in the screen? But also being able to stop the exam if you want to. So like the work we do with Don, if they do see somebody cheating, he has access to my team, and we can go into the assessment platform and turn them off right there. So that's one thing to consider. Also supports another advantage of live proctoring, so that if people have trouble installing a lockdown browser or something like that, you can provide real-time support like that.
Yeah, and I think there are questions on technology. That's also very important. The more technology that you're asking a candidate to manage, the more difficult it's going to become, and the more that you need that support. there. As we said, our goal, I've always told people, if you go to a test center and you meet all the requirements, you're going to take the test. You should be able to do the same thing online. And so you need to make sure you have tried and true technologies, use platforms. I mean, Mike, a lot of the stuff he's using big company tools, right? Because those big company tools don't fail. And when they do fail, they resolve them quickly. If somebody's using a small company tool that relies on a lot of downloads and other things, the amount of technical problems goes up, resolution is slow, and it creates all those issues, either in live proctoring or in remote. You got to have technology that works, and then you've got to be able to have people that can support it, because that candidate's stressed and they need to test. So trying to hit 100% is a great standard for us all to shoot for.
And you really do, whether you're interested in an AI solution or a live human proctoring solution, you want to be looking for a solution that is, from a technology standpoint, is as close to just standard browser based as possible. Software downloads, in addition to all the challenges that Don just mentioned, also have end up getting into privacy concerns of having some executable program that you've created installed on other people's computers, and concerns about what that software is able to track or do that create concerns for people as well. So the closer you can keep your proctoring solution to being truly browser based, like standard browser based, like through a Chrome or Microsoft Edge browser, is going to open it up to as many people as possible. It's going to give the broadest access to test takers, and is also going to have the lowest technology requirements in general.
Speaking of access, one of the questions was about working with examinees whose native language is not English, or they're spread around a lot of different time zones as well. How do you work with organizations that have those types of requirements?
Well, for us, I mean,
Yeah,
I was going to say that our platform, one thing that we implemented actually just a couple of years ago is to incorporate a translatable interface so that the test candidate can select their native language, so that all of the proctoring interface can be translated into their native language. We have a Google Translate feature built into the proctor side of the platform, so that if they need to communicate in a different language, they can. So those are some ways that that tend to help a lot in terms of language differences. But in terms of people being located all over the world, AI is going to, or an automated remote proctoring solution is going to give you the potential for just on-demand, immediate test delivery with proctoring in place. But as Don said, there's also a lot of variability in terms of a live proctoring solution that can be delivered pretty immediately as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. Do you need test content translated, and can that be done natively in the test driver or the learning management system's native quiz engine? Any proctoring technology translatable? Is any support translatable? So it's oftentimes not just one switch is flipped and I go from English to French or English to Spanish. There's test content that the candidate's looking at. There's proctoring interaction, and then there might be a support engagement. And many companies can't support multiple languages, but I always caution people that yes, our application can flip. Our agents can use a translate tool, but what about your content and that actual driver?
Yeah, that last point there is important for me as the exam engine provider. The content and the exam engine are actually two different things, and just because you put all your questions in as Spanish doesn't mean the actual exam engine is in Spanish with the calculator and everything else.
Yeah, and you don't want that to be the responsibility of someone else, making a translation of your exam content, because then you have, you're not in control of determining whether that translation is correct, or whether it's equitable to the English version, or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, what are some of the operational hurdles that come with implementing remote proctoring for a new organization? Some things that they should be thinking about ahead of time if they're considering a move to remote proctoring, and how would you address them?
For us, I mean, when it's a new organization, one of the first things that comes up for us is, are you already delivering exams online, and this is just remote proctoring is new, or if your exams have not been delivered online up to this point, have you got a test engine or a test platform already selected, or do you need help finding one, right? And if you started with the remote proctoring, usually there's already a test platform, but we partner with test platforms and try to make recommendations on the options that may be most appropriate for the kind of exam you're trying to deliver. So you have a lot of technology decisions to make about a complete testing program that goes beyond just the remote proctoring. But the other kind of the other stuff is usually based around developing the content on your organization side that you need to explain to candidates how they're going to register for or take the exam online, and and give them all the content necessary to to explain how proctoring works, and and how it's incorporated into your exam. So there's a lot of like documentation and content that you'll have to prepare that'll go along with that, and that's something that we're trying to get better at getting. When we have a new client onboarding and they're really just starting with remote proctoring for the first time, over time we've gotten better at trying to give them the heads up that if you have a certain date that you have an expectation of being able to launch your online exams, there are some things that we can't do for you that that often include communications with your test candidates, developing that content and things like that need to be in place, before you really can launch. You don't want to wait, until until all the technology stuff is in place to get that stuff started.
Yeah, that's something I definitely deal with. I have always told organizations I work with, it's easy to onboard with the test platform, such as just importing items, and that only takes a couple hours. But setting up a practice exam process and candidate communications, what are the rules the candidates have to log in to remote proctoring? There's so much work that goes into that, and I take months to get everybody on board.
I would say
Dr. Mike, anything to add to that?
hurdles. Yeah, I'd say a couple hurdles are starting with volume. There isn't a magic number, but if someone's like, I think I'm going to do 10 proctored exams a year, it's like, you probably shouldn't waste your time talking to us and just do it however you were doing it before. So there's definitely a volume threshold. Maybe it's 5 a month, and that's when you should look for a service provider. There is some number. And then I would say sometimes it's a lack of clarity on the purchaser's decision-making process. So I'm talking to an organization, and it can be very clear on how they make decisions, who signs off on it, who's going to be the practitioners and points of contact that we work with. Or other times it's committee-based decision-making, and they looked at this last year because it was important to someone and they didn't make a change. Or they ask up front about, well, how much does it cost? And then I ask, is price the most important factor, or is it a factor at all for you all? So sometimes it's a challenge to understand the organization that we're talking to. How are you all going to make decisions? I know how we work, and I think we're easy to work with, and I could turn this thing on today for you. But there's a lack of clarity on what's important to that organization, and am I even talking to the right stakeholders at the time? And then all the other things that have already been shared. Have you used something before, or have you not? Is this the first time your candidates are going to be interacting with this?
Yeah, it's communication, right, Lane? I mean, it goes back to just sitting down and really understanding what the process, what changes are going to be involved, how is it different? The example of going from an sort of record review automated. So someone came from Mike, and they were using Proctor Free, and they need to come over and they need live proctoring. Yeah, it's a different onboarding process, right? Candidates in Mike's world probably are used to clicking a button and going, right? In the live world, it's going to take 10 minutes to get up and going because of all the different things that we do. And so really, as Mike said, where are they coming from? Have they used it before? And what changes? Yeah, we can have you testing tomorrow, but the reality is, to make this successful, we just need to communicate well, get the right documents, the right instructions out to candidates, the right instructions out to the administration team, and then you move forward. And there's always going to be bumps in the early stage. I mean, I love it when it just happens, but it doesn't always do that, right? There's always some breakdown there somewhere. So you work through that, you get them going, and then 2 months down the line, everything works great.
That's a good point. Like you need to go into it with the right expectation that launching will really just start a process of optimization. It's great when it's like Tom said, it's great when it goes off without a hitch right away. But there tends to be a process of sort of optimizing, particularly with our live proctoring onboarding process. We want to keep going back and looking at it and figuring out how to make it more efficient or more clearly communicated and all that.
Perfect. Thanks. Then last question before we do some wrap-ups and contact information. What are some of the future trends you see with remote proctoring? Where do you see this going, both in terms of technology, but also outside forces like privacy situations, legal situations in the EU or the US, or anything else that's impacting your work?
I think the direction that Proctor 360, has kind of always taken, and I think that it's in terms of expanding the types of exams and the stakes, for the exams that we can make available for organizations that want to be able to deliver them online, is we're really moving, towards being able to deliver live proctoring where there's multiple views, where you're capturing different parts of the environment than just the narrow, field of view of a standard webcam, so that you can either see the test taker's desktop or even see a 360-degree view around the room. And I think that in terms of the future of remote proctoring, I think that there probably will always be the kinds that we have now. I think probably always be there, but that's definitely a direction that we focus on a lot. Is figuring out new ways to just make, to capture more and see more during those remote exams, to just, protect that, the integrity of that testing process.
Yeah, I just for me, the future is about shortening the timelines, right? Even it's how do we get to the point where you can get instantaneous results and do it efficiently, and just keep driving there, right? There's technology components, people components, process components. And then it's just staying ahead of all of the different ways that people can access content. I'm fascinated in the future to see how generative AI is going to change the whole learning process and how people write and do different things. But I think ultimately it's getting to the point where we can validate that exam when that button is hit, right? And that's driving us there with some combination of people, process, and technology.
I think the future, there's going to continue to be a feeling. This may not be true, but the feeling of market instability and consolidation, and that the market and service providers aren't necessarily settled on what they'll ultimately be. And I don't know that that's a good thing or bad thing. It's just, I think that's the environment we're in, where there's been constant adoption, there's been constant change, and there's been constant consolidation activity. So for an educated consumer that's paying attention to this stuff, that's fine. But then there's also the consumers where, what do you mean this is happening, or something changed? And they're very reactive versus someone that just kind of subscribed to probably your newsletter. You probably have a lot of more educated and thoughtful people in this webinar versus I'm just in an organization, this is the way we've done things for 6 years, and boom, I get an email, and 90 days from now I got to put a plan in place to change, and that's a very reactive experience.
Yeah, I can see that with organizations that were just doing simple training quizzes on an LMS, and they've been doing it unproctored for years, and now somebody says, hey, we should probably doing this proctored. That's a big change. All right, well, I'd like to finish off by thanking all the three of you. This has been very enlightening for me. I hope it's useful for the organizations that have been listening in as well. Let's finish by each one of you talking a little bit about how somebody can get in touch with your organization if they want to learn more about the services or just connect with you.
Yep, perfect. I'll start. It's real simple. monitoredu.com. Make sure you put the dot between the edu and the com. Some people get confused on the education side. And my email is just don@monitoredu.com. So really that simple.
Yep, this simple here as well. Visit proctor360.com. You can email me, Scott@proctor360.com. But if you go to the website. There's, a complete overview of all the different types of proctoring services that are available through our platform. And if you submit a demo request, you'll actually be directed to a calendar where you can, book a one-on-one demo and see all of it in action.
Nate knows how to get in touch with me. He's a good quality filter for all things.
Yes.
I put my contact info in the chat, but it's always a pleasure talking with the other folks from other proctoring providers. And Nate, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you all to all attendees as well. And we'll hope to see you on the next webinar.
Sounds good.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.